Hello everyone, welcome to our lesson 15 on Inauguration Day. So it's the 20th of January, and last week we were talking about what had happened actually on January 6th, and I still have the picture up on my whiteboard of the attack on the Capitol by supporters of Donald Trump, who said that he had invited them there, and various other things. So a lot has happened since that day. There was Congress met and impeached Trump, and then the Senate is going to hold the trial for his impeachment in a few days. We haven't been told when exactly. But there was some trepidation this morning from me and others I know that I talked with as to what would happen today. Would there be a peaceful transfer of power? So today what I want to talk about is the basic concept, and it's often heard. You'll hear it when any person in power, especially in government, takes matters into their own hand and act in a way that citizens or those who are being governed feel that they're breaking the law in some way. It's not the expected norm that, or the expected traditional way that this person is acting. So I thought today we'd talk about rule of law, and rule of law exists whenever laws are made, and then I do want to kind of attack this in the way that we did with our very first program when we went back into the history of words. When we were, I am a teacher in the Northern Berkshire adult education, and the class that I teach is ABE, ASE, language arts. So the reading and writing and that we do in this class, I actually found a quote that I had written down years ago, and it was saying that the learning languages are reading and listening. The teaching languages are speaking and writing. So keep that in mind. You can, once you learn something, you should share it, and you can do that by speaking or writing it down for future generations. You know, you may have found something that is very important for your children and grandchildren and those people that are in other generations. We can learn from reading history. So I just want to go over what my comments were and the events of today a little bit before I get into talking about the rule of law. So Donald Trump left the White House this morning at actually 8:16, and then he actually left Washington at 9 o'clock. So he flew by helicopter to the airport and then went to Mar-a-Lago. And at 12 o'clock, our new 46th President Joseph Biden and our new Vice President Kamala Harris were inaugurated and became the new administration. So it really is a historical moment. I truly can get emotional about the idea that I believe in the Constitution. Let me see, I have a call here. Hello? Hello?
Hi, Linda.
Hi. Who am I speaking to?
Hester Sheldon.
Oh, hi, Hester. Welcome. I'm glad you're watching today. Did you watch the inauguration this morning?
I just wanted you to know, me and Ron's watching.
Okay. So what did you think?
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm glad they got him out of the government.
Yes, that's true, Hester. I feel the same way. So we could maybe breathe a sigh of relief. Are you doing okay? We've been remote for a little while. Have you been able to do some of your work in your workbooks?
Yeah.
Good, good. Well, we'll be getting you some more materials pretty soon. If we don't go back, we'll be seeing you at your apartment, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so I'll thanks for
Get back to
watching.
this class.
I'll know you're out there. Thank you for calling.
All right.
Bye, Hester. Say hi to Ron.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye, Hester. Hester and Ron are students of ours, and Hester is, I would say, our most dedicated student. She loves to learn, and we have to find things for her to do because she does her work very quickly and enjoys learning so much. Thank you, Hester, for calling. So the thing that came to mind for me was that this administration will be a much more diverse administration. Oftentimes you'll hear people say who are minorities or even if they were girls in a boys classroom or boys in a girls classroom, that it helps for students to see a teacher that looks like them. There's more trust sometimes, and it's a truth. So we have a vice president now in Kamala Harris, who is Asian and she's from Jamaica, I think. Her mother's people were from Jamaica. So there's diversity there. But even the singers that came, we had Garth Brooks, we had Lady Gaga, Jennifer Lopez. And it was nice to see the former presidents and things like that. But it did surprise me that Trump did not welcome the new administration in. I was hoping that he would change his mind, but I guess he can't do it. That's his personality. But they will move on, and I did find with Biden's inauguration speech, the word unity was throughout that. And I think he will have a tough job bringing the country together with all the issues that are there, but people can change. People can sense a person who is sincere, and he seems to be that kind of person. And he and Kamala, as the head of the government now, have picked some really good cabinet members that they know what they're doing. And I think that's important that we have professionals in office this time. But I do want to say that it's also up to us. So anyone who voted last time in November, whether you voted Republican or Democrat, the fact is you voted. And that's what a democracy needs. It is we the people. And we must find some common ground, and we must talk to each other. The idea that almost half of what was it, 75,000 people, 75, I'm sorry. It was pretty close. Biden got 81 and Trump got 75. But the point being, there are people that are going to disagree, and that's what makes a democracy. But the problem is you don't take up arms and try to destroy the other side. So I think we can do it. we actually can do this. But it's going to take each person controlling themselves and agreeing to find that common ground. And I really have hope in it. Because if we don't, it's a shocking thing that the attacks came from within our country. It wasn't a force outside our country. So because humans do make mistakes or can be persuaded to go down the wrong path at times, we have what is called the rule of law. So let me go to the whiteboard and I want to show you a little bit of history about the idea of laws in general. And then we'll talk about what this means, this rule of law. So I'm just putting up what is the first page of something called the Code of Laws of the United States of America. And this is just like the table of contents. I'm not going to read it, but I want you to see the title, just the title. It's the Code of Laws of the United States of America. So if somebody is accused of a crime, they look into this book, this Code of Laws of the United States of America, and they can look up the different crimes that have been committed against the United States of America. And that's kind of why I came up with the idea of talking about law this week, because the attack on the Capitol falls under the heading of the crime of sedition. And it's listed in this book, and it does say that, and let me just read it to you, just a very basic, excuse me. It's basically when you would, I'm sorry, I misplaced the paper, but it's basically saying if you attack the government of the United States in order to remove or to take over or actually secede from the government, you're committing sedition. And this law actually was something that Abraham Lincoln was dead against. He said if we become a divided state, the United States, we will fall. A nation against itself cannot survive. So that sedition was what was planned on the 6th of January, but it didn't work. The people were trying to count the electoral laws, electoral ballots, and they were delayed, and they were threatened, and damage was done. 5 people were killed. It was a terrible, terrible thing. But that Congress, the House of Representatives and the senators went back, worked through the night, and voted Joe Biden as the legitimate president. So the idea of law is something that we see in the federal government, and my question always is, well, where did the idea of having laws come into being? So what I'd like you to see next is something that was created a long time ago, and it's basically it's found on a huge stone stele, they call it. It's been carved into like a monument that was placed in Babylon in 1790 BC, and it's basically I believe it was cuneiform writing, where they take clay tablets and they cut it with a sty, they call it, and then all these laws were created and set up in the middle of Babylon. So people who were under the rule of Hammurabi, they knew if you do something wrong, you're going to get this punishment. So the idea of laws way back then, 1790 BC, with a king named Hammurabi. He decided, in order for me, one person, to rule this society, I'm going to have to keep people from hurting each other or stealing from each other and things like that. So these are some of the things that Hammurabi decided were important in his code of laws. Let me just go over this. So some of the laws have really bizarre forms of punishment. It actually is where we get the idea that is found then in our Bibles, the Judeo-Christian Bible, where he basically was the first one to write down, and there's like 625 different punishments for different crimes. But one of the ones that we've all heard of, an eye for an eye, came from this Hammurabi, king of Babylon, way back when. There were also capital crimes that had really terrible death penalties. The punishments were really bad, so I'll give you a couple of examples. If a son and mother were caught committing incest, they were burned to death. If a pair of lovers conspired to murder their spouses, both were impaled. So there's no fooling around. You do something against what Hammurabi thought was morally correct, then you paid the price. A minor crime, though, could also have a really horrible punishment. So if you stole or if you slapped your father, your hand would be cut off. So, I mean, really gruesome, grisly things, but it was all written on this huge stone monument that was in the center of their town. And people knew this is what's going to happen to you if you commit this crime. And so Hammurabi decided this was a way to keep the peace. No fooling around. You do this, you're going to get this. And there was no wiggle room, and people accepted it. They just basically said, if it happens, that's what's going to happen to you. So don't do it. That sort of thing. It was they varied, however, because here's another one. If a man knocks out the teeth of his equal, his teeth shall be knocked out too. And there you can see the eye for an eye. If you're going to do something to somebody else, you get that done to you too. If you committed the same crime against a member of the lower class, you had to pay a fine. So there was that class society, which isn't great because it obviously assumes some people are better than other people. Let's see what we have here. I don't want to read all of them. A lot of fooling around, a lot of extramarital relationships, and what they did to those people too. The other thing that this code of Hammurabi did is that it includes one of the earliest examples of the presumption of innocence. So it says, while it's notorious for its barbaric punishments, Hammurabi's code also sets several valuable legal precedents that have survived to this day. It places a burden of proof on the accuser. So if somebody claims that you did something, say you stole some coins from, say you're accusing somebody of stealing coins from you, you have to prove that it was that person, and it's not up to them to just, for the court, or to say he's guilty because he said so. The person accusing had to prove it, which is pretty unique. Okay, so that's just one of the very earliest of laws. Okay, so this is, take a look online. You'll see some, like 625 different crimes and punishments. So the other one that I think we are aware of that guide both Christian and Judeo life is the Ten Commandments. And these were talked about when Moses went up on the hill and the mountain and got these from God. And you'll see that these are more of a religious feel to them. The first one being, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." But and then the second two, "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image." But then there's taking the Lord's name in vain, so there's they don't want swearing. You have to keep the Sabbath. You have to honor your mother and father. This seems to go along with the idea that tradition, there's a feeling of honor. They're the first people that kind of set the rules, the laws for you as a child. It also says, "Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery." Again, a societal thing that even Hammurabi seems to be obsessed with in many cases. "Thou shalt not steal." These are basic things that we can understand why these would be commandments now. They're calling them commandments, but they are laws. "Thou shalt not bear false witness." So you should not be lying about someone else, right? And "thou shalt not covet." So you shouldn't want something that somebody else has, that sort of thing. So in a way, it kept the society in that time from intruding on someone else's space, I would say. And that's another example of laws that have been known by everybody. Everybody knows these laws in that society. So what brings us to our laws is the Constitution. And we have our Constitution. It basically came from suggestions by Alexander Hamilton when he wrote the Federalist Papers. And there's all sorts of examples, essays that Hamilton, with help, wrote on what should happen in a democracy, not a monarchy. Because remember, we in America had been a colony of Great Britain. So when we get our independence from Great Britain, there's the need for laws. And people, including Madison and Adams and others, they want to set up some sort of a government where a king doesn't have the final say. Over in Europe and in Great Britain, you've got a monarch where the law there is that it's the king's law. If the king says off with your head, then you're walking around without a head, you know. They have the rule. They have the right. No one, there's not the idea of a court case or anything. And you can even see it when you're reading any of the Shakespearean plays. It's sort of the Wild West with fencing and swords and things like that. Somebody does something to you, you are supposed, look with Hamlet, his father is killed, he's got to revenge his death, all sorts of things, you know. There's no place a person can go for justice if the king doesn't agree with you, what your complaint is. So in America, it was decided we are not going to live under a king. And this is the very basic, very truthful, sincere desire for what this Constitution, our written down laws, should do for the people of the United States, a new country. And it says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice." Everybody, if something's done to you, we're going to find a way to solve this. Sort of think about with Hammurabi. You commit this crime, there's going to be a punishment for it. This is our version of justice. ensure domestic tranquility. That means that every single person in the United States should be able to have a peaceful day, to not have to live in fear, to be just be not afraid of anything that a neighbor or someone else could do to you. Provide for the common defense. So if someone was going to attack us as a country, that's where you're getting the idea of having a militia, an army to protect the United States. Promote the general welfare. That can broaden into the idea that if you are going to run a business, if you're going to take care of your family, if you're a farmer, it's like everybody's going to be taken care of either financially or when you get old, things like that. And secure the blessings of liberty. To ourselves at that time, when the Constitution was written, and our posterity, which means us now. When all of that, think of all of that they're thinking in their heads. We've got to put laws that make sure these things happen. And then they say, we now do ordain and establish this Constitution, our code of laws, for the United States of America. So this is where we get, when we're talking about our government and how we elect our leaders and things like that. A true democracy, and America's not perfect, but a true democracy is what we have really tried to have. And in a true democracy, we the people elect other people to govern us. We give them that power. We also, in the Constitution, can remove that person from office, or there's terms that are set up for different branches of the government. So I want you to see, this is just the beginning of the Constitution of the United States, but that's why the Constitution was written. All of those things, to make sure that our lives, every day, every person in America has all of those assurances. So laws, when you think about it, we don't like it if we get caught speeding, but think about it. There's a sign that says 35 miles an hour. If you're going over, we know we're going to get a speeding ticket. So it's kind of an interesting thing. The other part to that, though, is that you have to be able to know what the law is in order for someone to accuse you of breaking it. So laws must be written down or put up as signs. That's part of the general norm of what a law does. It maintains order, law and order. You see that when you see it on the side of a police car. So the law is there to make sure order is assured for the vast majority of people. If you go against the law, you have a punishment. Which brings us to, let me just get my pictures here. So we need to understand a little bit more about our Constitution, because the main part of the very first parts of our Constitution make sure that there are 3 branches of government. Now, the legislative branch is Congress. Under Congress, you have the House of Representatives. Those are called the congressmen. And then you have the Senate, and that's the Senate. So in the House of Representatives, based on the state's populations, you have a certain amount of representatives. Because there are 50 states, some bigger or smaller than the others, the House of Representatives has 435 members. In the Senate, there are 2 senators from every state. So there are 100 senators. That's one branch. The executive branch is where the president and vice president have their cabinet, the people they choose to work with them. And it's like, think of it as the president lives in the White House, and then they have their whole staff, and the president is elected for 4 years, and then there's another election, and a president can only serve for 2 terms. So a president can only stay in office for 8 years, and then someone else goes in. Very unlike a king who's there pretty much for life. If you think of Queen Elizabeth, king or queen, they're there until they die, and then one of their older sons, if possible, or oldest daughter, they become the rightful heir to the throne. There's no electing of a king or a queen. But that's the second branch of government. The other branch of government is the judicial branch, and that's the Supreme Court. And we have 9 people who are in our Supreme Court, and they are, if there's those are appointed or they're chosen by the president in office, and then they have to be confirmed by the Congress, both branches of the Congress. And President Trump managed to actually appoint 3 Supreme Court judges. And I was very pleased to see at the inauguration, they attended his inauguration. So that just goes to show that once they're in there, they actually, now think about this, they go by the rule of law. That's the highest law, the highest court in our land. And they look at other court cases since we were founded as a country, and they make the decisions, and there's always supposed to be 9 to break the tie. So so they always try to keep 9 Supreme Court justices in the judicial. Now the key thing to notice here in our Constitution is that these 3 branches, the legislative, executive, and judicial, are called co-equal. Neither of the 3 branches are more important than the other. They're all co-equal. They all are supposed to work together and maintain order for the United States citizens. And anytime there's any problems with that, the country does have issues. We talked last week about polarization of the country, where you've got Democrats and Republicans who have gone way to the left or right, and they seem to have a real problem with finding some common ground. And that's normally where it gets fought out in the legislative branch, because they make the laws. You can have an executive order from the president, but it has to always be confirmed by Congress. That's how a law is made. The judicial doesn't make laws, the executive doesn't make laws, the Congress makes the laws because they all vote on it. Those are our closest representatives. They don't have a vote for every law that people want to pass, so they have our representatives and senators decide that for us. So that's talking about the rule of law and why laws are important. So these are the 5 principles that we can talk about when we're talking about the Constitution. The very first one is called popular sovereignty, and that says that the power lies with the people. So again, much different than under a king or queen. That's where the power lies in a monarchy. We're a democracy. The second thing is that there is a rule of law, and all people must agree to follow the law. The law that we can talk about is the Constitution. We can talk about the states' laws. States have their own laws too. Or even families, you know, you set a certain rule for your children, they have to be in by a certain time, you know. There's usually a consequence if they don't come in at the right time, right? Because you're trying to keep them safe. Laws are meant to keep order, think of it in that way. A third principle for the Constitution is that power is divided among the three branches, which I explained a few minutes ago. And the reason that's important is that each branch of government provides a check and balance to the other one. So each branch, it says, and I'll read it, each branch checks on the others to make sure one doesn't become too powerful. The concept of federalism is another thing that is the principle that is guiding our Constitution. And remember Hamilton, they were looking at some of his essays on how to set up the government. And it says, power is shared between the federal and state governments. So it doesn't exactly say that the federal government is stronger than the state governments. In fact, they're supposed to be working together, but there's three sort of categories under there. There's an expressed power that says the powers left to the federal, some of the powers that are not in the Constitution are left to the federal government. Other people are talking about reserved powers. If it's not in the Constitution, the power is left to the states, but concurrent powers are powers that are shared by both. So we have like we have to pay our taxes to the state of Massachusetts, but you also have to pay your taxes to the IRS who manages the federal government. So these are the 5 principles: that the power lies with the people must follow the law, agree to follow whatever laws are clearly out there, and we all should know what the law is and what it says. There are 3 branches of government. Each branch is supposed to check and balance the other one, and that there are certain powers that the government has and certain powers that the state has. And you'll also see that even if you go into like our towns and cities, there are certain fees for, like, if you want to go fishing, you have to get a license. They have the power to charge you money for certain things you want to do. And that you agree that if I want to go fishing, I want to have a license, I have to pay for the license, and then I'm allowed to do something. So that's the Constitution. So we've been talking about law, but I still have mentioned the rule of law. So let me just put this up, and you've probably seen this. So these are what are called this is a statue that is often represented, and it's called the scales of justice. And with the scales of justice, you'll notice the woman is blindfolded, and that means that she's going to be impartial. If a case comes up, the main thing that will tip the scales, guilty or innocent, are going to be the facts. Facts have to be shown. Impartiality is part of the justice system. Everyone is supposed to be treated equally in a court of law, and again, there should be evidence, and no one is above the law in a democracy. So I'd like you to see a short video where some of our Supreme Court justices are explaining the rule of law to you.
I would describe the rule of law as fairness. It is a set of rules that everyone needs to abide by.
We can't have peaceful interactions with one another without the rule of law.
Our social compact is based on the idea that we are each and every one of us accountable to the law.
Your right to swing your fist stops just short of my nose. And that's what the rule of law is meant to do, is to find that boundary between expression, freedom, liberty, and everything we want to do, and when we hurt others.
For example, this morning I went to buy a breakfast sandwich, and everything that I did to get that sandwich was related to the rule of law in some way, in the sense that I was able to cross the street safely because I knew that the people driving their cars were going to stop at the stoplight. And I had trust that they were going to do that because there would be consequences under our law for that.
I can get up in the morning and know that the dollar will be accepted down the street at the grocery store. I can go to the post service and expect that I can retrieve my mail and that someone won't take it, or that someone won't view it without my permission.
I then go and buy the breakfast sandwich. I know that the company I'm buying the breakfast sandwich from has to follow the rule of law and with regard to food regulations, so I know that the food I eat is going to be safe. The company similarly can't overcharge me because there's going to be penalties for that.
It affects our quality of life in that we're able to sleep at night knowing that tomorrow morning we'll wake up, the stock market will be working, the speed limits will be enforced, the laws will be applied to each and every one of us.
One of the great things about the rule of law is the protection of minority rights. Our Constitution has embedded within it a counter-majoritarian principle. What the Founding Fathers said was to protect us against the tyranny of the majority.
The most important thing that I felt from taking the oath was to make sure that I applied the rule of law in a fair manner to everyone.
And what that means is that 51% of the people or 90% of the people can't deprive the minority of certain inalienable rights. The right to worship, the right to speak, the freedom of the press, the right to keep and bear arms, the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures.
No matter what their background, no matter where they came from, no matter what they look like. And that's what I try to do every day, is to apply the law fairly and evenly to every party that's before me.
We are bound to follow the law. The law is the statutes, the law that is written by people who are elected by the people. And we have to comply with that law. We have to follow the Constitution.
New citizens swear an oath, not to the flag or to the president or to America, but to the Constitution, to our supreme law of the land.
The rule of law means that everybody understands what the law is, and everybody also understands that they will be held to that law, and that there's no way of getting out of that, including the government.
Rule of law means that the laws are public, people know what they're expected to do, and you can rightfully hold them to that knowledge. Now, I'm not saying you could go out in the street and give a quiz about the U.S. Code to every person who's walking by, but the public nature of the law is critical. And the public nature of the judicial process is critical.
After reading a lot about Greek history, Roman Republic, Roman Empire, all the way forward up to the present day, it was interesting to see what made civilizations thrive and what made civilizations fail. And the only civilizations that thrived were civilizations that emphasized the rule of law.
So you could see on that video, most of those people were in their black robes. They were either judges or legal people who sit on the bench. And we had former President Trump had quite a few federal judges appointed based on a list called the Federalist List. And it comes from the Republican Party, actually. So he did accomplish that, and it sometimes makes me think that that's why sometimes he seemed to go against the norms that I expected a president to you know, I didn't expect a president who would make up names for his opponents and do certain things. And it was and is his personality. But the federal judges is something to look at, because if you're going to go to a court for some federal crime, those judges are going to perhaps be more conservative rather than a Democratic judge that could be more liberal. And there is still the law, but there is some wiggle worm based on a judge's judgment, I guess that's the word, when you're before them in court. And we've all maybe been in a courtroom or seen courts cases on television, and it's a nervous place to be if you're the defendant. But we are assured in this country that at least you're getting a fair trial, and sometimes there's a jury trial too. So one of the judges mentioned the Greeks and the Romans. So I want to show you how the decision on what a law should or could be is not always an easy matter. These are the two Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle. And I'd like to just read a couple of things that each of them said, because again, they weren't in total agreement on what the rule of law meant to them. And this is Plato advocated that society should be ruled by a benevolent monarchy, ruled by an idealized philosopher king who was above the law. So Trump would have liked him, because when he's trying to pardon himself, and he didn't do it, but Plato believed if you were a ruler who was a philosopher, then you should be treated above the law. And but nevertheless, this is a quote from some of his writings. He said, "Where the law is subject to some other authority and has none of its own, the collapse of the state is not far off. But if law is the master of the government and the government is its slave, then the situation is full of promise and men enjoy all the blessings that the gods shower on a state." So the other philosopher pictured here is Aristotle. And he had a little different idea on who, whether a president or a ruler, actually they're talking about kings, monarchs, queens, but Aristotle flatly opposed letting the highest officials wield power beyond guarding and serving the laws. He was the father of law in a way to me, because he said men are corrupt, men can change their mind, men can be bribed. If you have a really good law and a good monarch that will uphold the law, then you got something. So he believed a ruler should be guarding and serving the laws for his people. And this is one of his quotes: "It is more proper that law should govern than any one of the citizens. Upon the same principle, if it is advantageous to place the supreme power in some particular person, they should be appointed to be only the guardians and servants of the law. And then they also are mentioning Cicero. We are all servants of the laws in order that we may be free. So my final image here I want to talk about, because this was talked about, I don't know if you were watching television during this time, but they also talked about the precedent that there should be a peaceful transference of power. And that's what makes America, America. We don't take over the person who is in charge by force, by military. That's called a coup d'etat. It's a French word, meaning taking over by force. And here's a couple of quotes that are listed here. So George Washington himself left office in 1797 after serving only 2 terms. He thought way back then, he said 2 terms is enough for any president, any person elected. He was appointed, if you remember. There wasn't a vote there was a vote among a few people, but there wasn't like this vote that we have now. When John Adams finally ends, there is an election, and he conceded defeat to a rival party in 1801 after losing re-election, and then just went home. And it is said around the world, they never saw anything like it, that he just packed up his suitcases and belongings and left when the next president came in. We also have another quote here from Ronald Reagan, and he said it in his inaugural address in 1981. In the eyes of many in the world, this every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal is nothing less than a miracle. And you can see that it was very hard for our past president to have the rituals and the norms that were expected by the citizens of the United States. The peaceful transfer of power is marked by examples set by our earliest leaders. It's a tradition from one administration to another, underscore our peaceful transfer. One of the things I saw today was that Vice President Pence did leave a letter for Kamala Harris, who is now our vice president. And I did hear that Donald Trump did leave a letter for Joe Biden. So it'll be interesting to see in the coming days what he had to say in that letter. But that's traditions, the norm, what we expect the outgoing president to do. And then the third thing it says is that legitimacy of the peaceful transfer of power. And without the peaceful transfer of power, elections wouldn't mean much. You know, if somebody got in because of an election and said, well, I'm not going, and we did see some of that from our former president, where he said that the election was stolen from him and there wasn't a real legitimate count of the ballots. And that really is not true, because it went through courts, went through our system of law, and it was determined that Joe Biden actually did get more votes than Donald Trump. So if you look into the history of laws, we don't like it when we're told we can't do something. But if you think of the bigger picture, most of us do have quite an orderly life. And as one of the judges in the video said, we know that because of stoplights and speeding limits and things like that, laws are made for our safety and to control our daily life in some sort of sense. So I want you to, as my class, if you could, look into what is happening, continuing with today's inauguration. It was not a normal one, because there were National Guards protecting the people's house. The Capitol is our house, and we the people, you know, we pay taxes, but we are also the citizens that put any rulers, I shouldn't say rulers, any government officials in that house by our elections. So the right to vote is very important, and if you can, please think about voting anytime you're given that privilege. Excuse me 1 second, I think there's a phone call. Is it? It's no? It is? Hello? Hello? Yes, hi Hester.
Yes, Hester. Could we have some of them papers when you have a chance?
The images?
Yeah.
Be glad to get them to you, Hester. Yes, I will definitely, I'll put them in a folder and we'll get them to you. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Hester.
Thank you. Give me some more work.
I will. I will. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we will, for anyone out there that would like to be a part of the courses and would like some of the materials and workbooks, there's plenty, there's online, we can give you access to the online curriculums that we use also. So you can contact North Berkshire Adult Education, and our phone number will come up at the end of this program. So have a good week, keep your eyes open. That is what a good citizen does, and when people are not doing what we think is according to the rule of law, we have the right to petition, we have the right to protest, that's in the Constitution, but peacefully, because nothing really is accomplished with weapons and destruction and things like that. So keep an eye on what's happening, because it really does affect your life. I wish you well, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for coming.